back in May, we had the chief economist of RBS give a presentation on his view of the recovery. I think Sebastian Burnside. And he had sort of three elements that he thought recovery required, and that was policy, adaptation, and demand. And certainly it looks as though the demand is beginning to warm up a bit. So obviously we've got the policy very clearly in place, and First Minister made her announcement last week about entering stage 3. Adaptation, I think we are seeing lots of businesses having to adapt and rethink their business models. But the critical thing is, will the demand be there to kind of get things up and running? And interesting to hear what you've got to say, particularly about tourism in the city. I think, you know, you've got plenty of other things to think about, but that seems to be the topic of the moment, I think, because we've been so heavily dependent on it as for our economy, making sure we've got that demand and awareness that Edinburgh will be open for business, and will we be open for business? So I'm just going to pass straight over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me. I was told like 2 minutes to 1:30 that my firewall wouldn't allow me to access Zoom. So I was desperately trying to find, I'm now using my wife's iPad to access this meeting. So at least I know how to do it, which shows you my, at least my technology ability is getting better. So I guess the key thing to say here is that there's an awful lot in the news about opening up, etc., etc. And we've certainly been pursuing a tactic of careful opening up and trying to get the right balance between public health and economic benefit up and running. So hopefully you will have seen that we are working very heavily with those businesses that can open in terms of tourism and hospitality, in terms of allowing people to take open up on the streets and open up on the pavements, and giving new licenses where that's required, a new license ability very swiftly, because that's what we've been trying to do. We've set our teams up to try and make sure that happens. We've been shutting down streets to traffic to allow businesses to open onto streets. So you should see Victoria Street, etc., etc., over the next week, certainly closing down to traffic to allow businesses to actually operate, those that can. We have just agreed at council to just put £50,000 into the marketing campaign for the city. It's going to tourism marketing campaign, which is going to be run by ETAG, which is going to promote the city to businesses in the first instance, of course, UK tourists, and those who are allowed to now start to enter the country from those countries that are on the, whatever the green list is from government. So an awful lot of frantic activity going on to start to respond to government almost making daily announcements about different ways of opening up. So today, shopping centres opening up, indoor shopping centres able to open up to the country. All of those cause us as a local authority logistical issues because we have to be able to respond to those quickly. And it is a whole mixture of regulation and adaptation of that regulation and adaptation of our working practices, etc. as we go. And I think the one that's been the bane of my life for the last probably the last 5-10 days has been huge demand to open up public toilets and parks and spaces. And if anybody listened to the committee the other week, you'd hear my total reluctance to do so, despite the demand, because public health, in my view, in this case, is more important than allowing people to drink on the grass in public parks. But it's that type of demand that we're getting every single day. Please open up. So in our business terms, we're also having to deal with what happens in our business, and quite a lot of our business. So we have 900 people furloughed currently in Edinburgh Leisure. How do you open up leisure centres and leisure facilities to the public? How do you open up libraries? How do you open up Vesher Hall to start to take on audiences, etc., and start to make money? So in lots of ways, as a business, we're facing the same issues as businesses are. in the same way that judgment about what is safe and what is not safe. And I was listening very carefully to, it's not surprising, I guess, where you get three different UK ministers saying different things about face masks, for instance, this morning. And that was the case. So the Prime Minister says something different to Michael Gove, says something different to Nicola Sturgeon. You start to understand why there's some confusion about rules and regulations. What I would say to you is I think for all businesses, they've got to pay really hard attention to the government website. And the reason for that is because the devil's usually in the detail in these things. They announce the opening up of in any type, but actually there's usually some rules and regulations around that opening up. And because they're happening daily, it would be absolutely impossible for me or anyone else to look at that and give everybody the right different advice that they will need to make sure that their businesses are in the right place. So, and then the last thing to say probably is there's some contradictions in opening up and restriction going on. So if you look what happened in Dumfries and Galloway, what actually happened in Dumfries and Galloway was that there was a factory in Carlisle had its workers going home to Dumfries and Galloway and spreading coronavirus in Dumfries and Galloway, and probably vice versa, as a result of doing so. And we can expect that to be the case going forward, where we're going to have, at very least, some pressure points of places where coronavirus has reappeared. And you can see that in every single country, if you look at that has opened up, where I think Germany today announcing 159 new cases, etc., etc. And why is that important? Because I think most of the policy that's coming out accepts that there is a number of risks to the sudden opening up to go back to normal, whatever normal looks like, because there are concurrent risks to be had. There is the possible return of coronavirus. We are running into an autumn where normally people would start to become ill with the flu. We have winter coming. And in all cases, people who are vulnerable get more ill during those cases, whether we had coronavirus or not. And the last bit of that, of course, is the thing that all of us in business or local authorities or government, for that matter, were worrying about before coronavirus hit us, was the rushing towards us of Brexit and what's going to happen there. And again, I was listening to the news this morning with my wife. You could see Brexit starting to appear on the horizon in terms of confusion about. Actually, this morning was about could you take your pet abroad, but actually the whole thing about can you take your pet abroad, can you have a driving license that operates? If you go to one country, can you come back so easily? Is Brexit related as much as it is COVID virus related? So those concurrent risks need to be taken into account. And probably the last thing to say is that we're just about to, all schools are just about to go back 100% on August the 11th, which is the next big set piece of 40-odd thousand young people going back into probably a non-social distancing environment. And the risks of them that is maybe obvious in terms of the difference we've been dealing with now. And also we're going to have 80,000 students kick off in September, and 43% of those would normally come from foreign, from abroad. And universities are anticipating that's still going to be the case. And most of the work I'm working on just now is to work out how you test and protect that environment so that it doesn't spread, COVID to other places. And it's very obvious, students, the minute they land on campus, are out in bars and pubs and nightclubs and those type of things, assuming that they're opened up, and we have to be wary of those. So it's a cautious approach, I think quite rightly, and I think, if I'm being honest, I think Scottish Government been very clear and actually very solid about trying to get the right balance between public health and business opening up, because nobody as a business wants to open up and then has to shut down again. And I think that, you know, that's where you start to get real worry. The last bit to say is we're working on jobs big time. We've got our job strategy group working very heavily in using the 25 million that was set against the city deal, and making sure that our ability to start to place people in jobs is there, and going to follow the announcement in the Higgins report, which suggested that a version of the Edinburgh Guarantee was going to be spread through the rest of Scotland. We're just trying to get some clarity about what that actually means, but what we think it means is that this is about ensuring that young people who are leaving school, leaving university, etc., have a route into employment and jobs, and making sure that that's essential. The other bits of the Higgins report will be reported by the end of July. So, you know, a couple of weeks' time. And we're at the end of July, we should know about what the government is likely to take on board and is likely to fund in terms of economic recovery going forward. And that's probably enough, Liz, because there is almost so much happening that it's impossible to even give it some coherence. Only to say is that we have a whole programme in the council which is nothing but about economic recovery. So that is in the area of that I've just mentioned, but investment and development. And we're still getting interest in the city in terms of investment and development. And we've had a couple recently, working with our festivals, etc., to make sure that there's a safe return in terms of this being the cultural capital, and making sure that we continue the very practical thing of getting business support, either through licensing or opening up, or business grants. And we did dish out more than £1 million worth of business grants very swiftly in Edinburgh. And between Edinburgh and Glasgow, I think we put out something like 20,000 business grants in a very short space in time. But of course, that is now coming to an end. So business grants starts to fine, and then furlough starts to tighten. So I think everybody understands it's becoming now right at the pointy end of how do you get your business up and running without complete business support and without furlough support, etc.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. Andrew, you mentioned sort of all the kind of roads are being closed to kind of open up the city and licenses being issued for sort of pavement cafes. Do you see this as an opportunity to keep these roads permanently closed? I know you've got, you know, this is the opportunity to look at that net zero carbon agenda. So do you think that the roads will open up? Or will the city kind of really be sort of closing its doors to traffic and private transport?
Where angels fail to tread here now, Liz. I think. I think.
I'd lob that one at you.
Yeah, I love that one. I mean, just to finish. So I think there is a chance that we can look at this permanently. Certainly the Climate Commission has just reported to us. I think that's an opportunity. Let's not all go back and assume that it's going to look exactly the same, particularly in terms of traffic patterns, etc. We have to very carefully do that, because we have to take into account everything from traffic flow, but how it affects business, how it affects the city, the running of the city, etc., and our ability to actually do so in terms of finances. But it would seem nuts we don't take advantage of the reduction in carbon emission in the city as a result of COVID, and don't just assume we're going to go back to where we were in terms of the same amount of traffic coming in. So the answer is yes, in theory. The practice will undoubtedly, the devil will be in the detail about how we actually do it. But we are working on it right now, and there'll be a paper going to committee next week, which says, here's what we're going to think about in a serious way over the next couple of months before we get back fully to the city running as it was.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Well, probably out of time, sadly. There's so many things that we could. I've got a list of things to ask, but I think everybody has to get on, and no doubt you're on to your next call almost immediately. But thanks for joining us. As everyone knows, this is a regular feature. We're going to be doing this every Monday, so we can pick up all these other questions as things start to emerge. But thank you very much for joining us, and thanks everyone. I don't know whether you've got any final thoughts, Andrew?
No, except I'll get onto Zoom quicker next time. No, I know what the problems are. No, I don't think so. I think everybody's got to just think this through carefully in terms of planning. We're all having to do the same thing, but we have to think about the concurrent risks. Open up, close back down again, open up, close back down again. How does that affect us? And think that through in terms of the business plan. We certainly have to do the same thing. So I don't think that's any different for a small or a large business.
And I know, and I think that is the big challenge that worries us all. You talk about the sort of job guarantee and all these initiatives to get people into jobs. Unfortunately, you need businesses that are not failing. We have to mitigate that permanent business closure. And it's not good enough to kind of close the stable door after the horse has bolted. We want to protect jobs rather than try and recover jobs. Yeah. So I think we probably need to pick up that theme next week, hopefully.
Okay, I will do. Yeah, that's easy enough to do. Well, not easy enough to do, but okay.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you all and keep this a regular Monday morning catch up. Thanks a lot. Have a great week, everyone. Bye.